Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Thank you for being here, Daniel.
Happy Monday, Dr. Paul. How are you?
Well, very well.
Good.
Very well. And I guess we'll go back to the Middle East again. That seems to be a hot spot.
Big stuff.
But who knows? Maybe something will surprise us. Maybe someplace like Ecuador or some like Assad, and all of a sudden
about that.
blow up. And of course, if they get bored, they can always bring up North Korea and South Korea or whatever. But right now, the Middle East is still the big deal. And there was big news about what was going on a border dispute. And that has to do with the Turks and the Kurds and our alliances. How is America to settle this problem? Two of our close allies are fighting with each other. Yeah. And it dawned on them, it wasn't a good idea just to get in the middle of those two. That was a pretty good reasoning, don't you think?
Yeah.
You have the Turks coming in and the Kurds, and we've been allies of both. But it sort of proves our point that some of these military alliances are confusing and not helpful. If you have alliances which are voluntary and for trade reason, you don't get involved in the middle. Most of the time, a voluntary arrangement and trading sorts this out. But anyway, Trump made the announcement, we're coming out, but that didn't go over so well. There's a few people very annoyed with what he's doing. There weren't a whole lot of people supporting him, except the constitutionalists, the libertarians, the anti-war people. Yeah. But the noise on the television, it really elicited a lot of strong feeling. I was sort of attracted to, or at least my attention went to, the fact that Trump was talking to some evangelicals over the weekend. Mm-hmm. And if any place you should be able to go, that if you're taking a controversial position to avoid war, I have this belief that you should get strong support from somebody who professes to believe in the Prince of Peace.
Yeah, the Prince of Peace.
But he didn't get that same reception. No. It's a much of a mixed bag, and that doesn't mean that every evangelical feels the same way. No. But it's chaotic, and I think you have some maps there to show some of the chaos there. Yeah. Who has what? Whose territory? Who's going to see? They don't talk about the oil, but I think they're always saying, "Who's getting the oil? Yeah, who's getting the oil?" And I think over the weekend it might have just shifted that the apparent ownership of the oil might turn out to be Syria.
Yeah, of course. And last week there was a flood in Washington, a flood of tears over the Kurds. The poor Kurds, we've got to stay there. We can't pull a single troop out because the Kurds are going to be slaughtered. That was the mantra. In reality, as you pointed out in your column today, that was just an excuse to keep the troops there. And over the weekend, on Friday I think it was, the Foreign Affairs Committee, your old stomping grounds, the chairman and the ranking member, Elliot Engel, and our friend McCall from Texas, introduced legislation hitting Turkey hard with sanctions. How dare they go in there, hit their banking sector, prohibit some senior officials from traveling to the U.S. It's also going to add a few things into it, like sanctions for them daring to buy some Russian missiles instead of American missiles, and all these sorts of things. They want to push Turkey, I guess, further into the alliance with Russia and Iran, because that's the effect. So hitting a NATO ally like this, it's certainly weakens NATO, which is good news for us. But what they're really doing is they want to commit the United States to defend between an ally, as you say, the Kurds, and a NATO ally, an actual treaty ally, the Turks. And that's what they did over the weekend. They were going to hit the Turks hard. Something big happened on Sunday, which is something that a lot of people not inside this bubble of Washington predicted, that the Kurds, looking around them at oncoming Turkish troops, would say, you know what, we made a big mistake making this alliance with the U.S., thinking we're going to get our own territory carved out of Syria. We're going to have to go talk to Assad and figure this out.
Now, this bipartisan agreement, interestingly enough, bipartisan, it was condemning Trump and Erdogan. Yeah. Erdogan doesn't have the right to deal with his borders, and of course, Trump isn't doing it the right way. He's just aggravating. So there's an anti-Trump sentiment there, unrelated to the war going on there. Anything they can get Trump on. But what about this morning? Good night. Can you imagine that ABC did something sort of like fake?
Yeah.
I mean, they took footage out of a shooting range and put it up and said this had to do with somebody slaughtering the Kurds. I mean, I don't know much about those pictures and all, but it seems like somebody along the way, didn't take long for them to figure it out, but where are their minds?
Yeah.
They think they can get away with it. Maybe they've gotten away with it for so long, and maybe conditions are changing. Might be a good sign. Nobody trusts anything they say. They don't trust the media. They don't trust the government or anything else. And find it was all fake.
Yeah. Actually, if we can skip over those maps and go to that last link, if possible, and just get a look at that headline. I don't know if we can call that up, but it's exactly what you were saying. But it's ABC News.
Oh, yeah.
This is not some junior high kid's blog or some guy, some crazy. This is ABC News with all of the things at their command. All of these editors. What did they do? They said they showed footage. This is the Kurds getting slaughtered. Turns out it was from 2017. A bunch of guys shooting at a shooting range. So fake news, fake news, fake news.
So we
propaganda.
always have to turn it into a positive, and the positive is be questioning. Question everything, especially if it's coming from anybody official in the government, and if it comes from the media. And it's a terrible situation because both sides participate in it. Of course, I'm sympathetic to think that maybe the uglier things are coming from one side, but it is good for people to be questioning. And it might be the reason that our numbers are growing. We're getting tens of thousands of more people signing up to our program.
That's true. And, we're going to get hit again for me saying this, but here's the reality. As we've said many times, we're not in favor of a strong executive beyond what the Constitution allows, but the president does have the authority to move troops. President Trump, I'll say it very wisely, a few days ago, decided to get U.S. troops out of the space between Turkey and the Kurds. Pull out, pull back, get them out of the way. The smart thing to do, and they got out quick. And it turns out they were shot at, and this was a big deal. They say because the whole point is to demonize the Turks, and we're not defending the Turks, but to demonize them, say they were shot at by the Turks. They're actually shot at by the Free Syrian Army, our former allies.
Right.
That's who hit them, who are now allied with the Turks. Here's a quote from the Washington Post. They finally figured out what's going on there. This is a quote. "This is total chaos," a senior administration official said midday, speaking on the condition of anonymity about the confusing situation in Syria. Although, quote, "the Turks gave guarantees to us that U.S. forces would not be harmed," the official said, "Syrian militias aligned with them, with the Turks, quote, are running up and down the roads, ambushing and attacking vehicles, putting American forces as well as civilians in danger, even as they withdraw." And here's the key sentence, Dr. Paul. "The militias, known as the Free Syrian Army, are, quote, crazy and not reliable." This is the exact same Free Syrian Army that the U.S. has spent billions of dollars equipping, now running around, and also that it's supported by Engel, McCall, all the Neocons, Max Boot, all of the Kagans, everyone. The Free Syrian Army, these are the ones that are shooting at our troops now as we speak.
They're not licking their wounds. They're looking on for the next battle. We made the point many times that the Iraq War was ridiculous, bad, didn't serve much purpose, other than building an alliance with Iraq and Iran. And we're supposed to be, our whole life and energy is supposed to be directed toward destroying Iran, and I still believe they do. I think it's just stupidity that does it. But what's going on here now, the rearrangement in Syria, is helping Iran. Iran's stronger now than they were before. And of course, Russia, everybody knows you're supposed to hate Russia.
Yeah.
They're in the driver's seat. They actually at times come across as maybe the peacemakers. They can justify their presence there. Anyway, the response from Trump, since he does good things, I believe his instincts are anti-war, and sanctions and moving troops around and threatening is short of, marching troops into a country. But he's not, I would consider, not philosophically consistent.
No, that's
but
kind.
So what does he want to do now to compensate for this? The blundering that helps Iran from their perspective is, We need troops on the Holy Land of Arabia and the Muslim in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
3,000 troops to Saudi Arabia. And if people remember, they realize that American troops on that peninsula helped motivate Al-Qaeda.
Yeah.
Al-Qaeda was furious about that. And I'm sure they still are, because we may be, and let's hope we're leaving Syria. And Trump could be right on that we don't need that war and stay out of that war if we could just continue that momentum. But Al-Qaeda is still going to be around. And that's what these people, the people who are pushing that resolution in Congress say, we have to stop it. The same old thing. ISIS will be back. We left too soon, from Iraq, and ISIS rebuild itself. They always have to have the enemy out there. And they never ask the question, who incites the enemy? It just may be our policy that does a little bit of that incitement.
Yeah, and I wonder, Trump is pretty astute at optics, and I just wonder how this is going to fly with the Americans, having our troops over there protecting the Saudis. That's. But we should probably go to the maps. We've got a little further along than we meant to.
Sure, how chaotic it is.
Yeah, it's good to see. Here's the first one. And the Syrian government-controlled areas are in black here. The Kurdish force. This is as of the 7th of October. So before really the Turkish incursion. The Turkish-backed rebels are up there in the red. The Kurds occupy the blue area. Interestingly enough, the Syrian rebels and jihadists are all around the U.S. base down there in the southeast part of Syria. But let's look at the second map. This is a little more.
Wait, before you do that,
sorry, you go.
They don't list what the white part is. Is that undeclared?
I think it's uncontrolled. Yeah, that's all desert, I think.
Okay, we won't worry about that.
There. But here's a second one it's more complicated, but you can see this is what's happening as of today. This is from Southfront, which does a very good job on maps. And we'll leave it up for a second. It is very complicated, but it shows the U.S. pulling back toward Al-Tanf. It shows the Syrian army from Hasaka going up to capture a couple of Kurd villages that had been held by Kurds. In Hasaka, the Syrian army had been garrisoned there, had been sort of trapped there by the presence of U.S. troops. They're now gone. A lot is happening very quickly up there, Dr. Paul, and it is all because of the deal that the Kurds made with the Syrian army, and the Kurds had to give up on their dream of carving out this land. It's not going to happen. They're not going to get the autonomy. They're going to give up a lot. But what has the neocons in tears, yet again, they're always crying, is that really this alliance marks the end of the neocon, and I would say both in Israel and a lot of the Gulf countries, their fantasy, their dream to basically partition Syria out of existence. Here's Kurd land, here's Sunnistan, here's the Shia area. They want to basically partition it out. And it's also going to allow Assad to reestablish control over his entire country, including, as you point out, the oil fields near Deir ez-Zor. So this really, I think, effectively is the end of the regime change policy for Syria.
And this makes the point that people say, well, if we leave, war will break out. So this makes the point that so far we left and a new coalition has developed, and if the Kurds can live with the Syrians and vice versa, they're two local people. I mean, the Kurds live in Syria and they live in Turkey. Maybe things can be worked out and set an example. But this is, I think, and you mentioned again, the big thing is Syria is in a much better position with the oil probably going to be in their hands, and they also were the ones that did not want Obama to win. But this shows that Obama really has lost.
Yeah,
those are the neocons
exactly.
you talk about. The silence of Obama not being, noisy about it all. Most people don't realize it. He really got us involved there.
I mean,
without
Obama.
him, we wouldn't have started. If he wouldn't have started it, then Trump gets in, and he's not inclined to start a new one. We wouldn't have had anything done. Now, we've added up, and there have been numbers about the amount of money we spend, but it's hard to figure out how much have we spent on Syria and how much on Iraq, because it's all fungible, and there's weapons and all this. But there is a cost. There is no doubt about it. Even though the casualties were minimal in Syria, the other type of casualties, economic casualties, the loss of respect for us, and also because it's an economic matter, it probably has built momentum for the undermining of the dollar and financial crisis coming to us. Yes, we can put sanctions on everybody else, but when the market puts sanctions on us because somebody's tired of us, being in charge with the reserve currency in the world, that's a cost that's hard to measure, but it'll be borne by all Americans, and it won't be just poor Americans. It's going to be a lot of people who suffer from this. Of course, the very, very wealthy will know it's coming and be able to probably protect themselves, but nevertheless, there's a high cost from this, and but we'll never know what exactly that cost is.
Yeah, and we blame Obama correctly, but let's not forget that geopolitical genius Hillary Clinton, whose great brain was behind all of this. Let's have an Arab Spring. Let's have revolution everywhere. It's going to be great. They're all going to be just like us. So let's not forget her. Just one addition to your comment on cost. Here's another cost that I'm sure Hillary would say is worth it. 500,000 people dead. Now, there may have been some conflict there. There was certainly some unrest and unhappiness. But I don't believe that if we had not gotten involved and decided to arm Al-Qaeda and all these guys, we would see 500,000 people dead and a country ruined.
Yeah, we perpetuated a bad situation, made it much worse. It lasted a lot longer, and the innocent die. There's a strong argument to be made to defend those who want to be brave enough and strong enough to seek peace.
Yeah.
Because people who seek peace are considered to be the wimps of the world, and yet when you have the whole world against you, just think of the number of people that have come down, and we think Trump on occasion goes in the right direction, but think of the grief that he gets put through that. So you do have to have strong beliefs to do that, but those individuals are seen as weak people, and it takes a lot to do that. But all we can do is try to point out the errors of their ways and encourage them to go in the right direction. And of course, the ultimate solution is not complicated. Yep. Daniel, I think I've said it once before. Yep. Just come home, mind our own business, but talk to people and trade with people. The whole world would be better off.
Amazing how that works.
Yes.
Well, I'll close out. First thing, I would just want to make a point that I saw photos this morning of people in the street in Raqqa, which have been occupied by the Kurds with U.S. backing. They're in the street waving the Syrian flag, welcoming the Syrian army. Again, that just exposes the lie that Assad can't wait to gas his people. They wouldn't be feeling that way. But I'm under the influence of Dr. Paul, so I'm always looking for good news. I always want to be optimistic. So I prepared my closing with a good news story. I would say, although we're not happy about incursions and there will be some more conflict, I would call this a win-win-win-win. And here's why. The Turks win. They eliminated this idea of autonomous Kurdish region on their border, which was controlled by the Syrian division of the PKK, which is recognized as terrorists. That's gone. That problem is going to be solved. The Kurds win because they survive. They have a chance for the future. They're not going to go to the slaughter that the Neocons were worried about. That's going to happen. The Syrians win. The territorial integrity is preserved. It's the end of regime change. They have a chance now to recapture some of these oil fields and aquifers, try to get back to a normal country. The U.S. wins, and we're concerned about that. We're forced out of the stupid Obama policy of regime change. We're forced to pull back. American troops will be less in danger of fighting where they don't belong, and hopefully they can act to protect us. Even the Russians win, from their perspective. They're seen as the adults in the room. It's widely suspected that they brokered the deal to allow the Syrian army and the Kurds, Syrian government and the Kurds to make a deal. So everyone wins. The best thing would be, as Dr. Paul says correctly, is for us to pull out completely from Syria.
Very good. And touching on the truth is a big help, but I have to warn you that if you continue to do this, Daniel, you're liable to get banned from Twitter, and what about Facebook? Who knows what?
Everywhere.
So we better make our plan. No, let's look at the positive. But we like it too because we see the success of what we believe in working. And we can find so many examples that in pre-intervention days for the United States and different times throughout history, believe it or not, there were times within one country that Christians and Jews and Muslims got along together, and then they didn't fight and kill each other. Matter of fact, one country that had a pretty good reputation for this was Iran. So it's a sad story that we have to turn that around, but all we can do is point out the good side of local control and limited control of government, and also believing that non-aggression is right. And this is big aggression because it's government, and then it gets the special interest behind the government, that is the military-industrial complex, and the media, and all these groups gets behind these acts of aggression. So yes, then they induce people and make people commit personal acts of aggression, build up hatred, then take 18-year-old kids to go out there and say, well, start shooting them, because they're our enemy now. And it's just atrocious. It's so unnecessary. And there has been times of more peaceful conditions, and there probably will be fights for a long time to come, but there has to be less and less. So I think the more that we can get this information out, and that people shouldn't be frightened about peace, that is the way, if you truly believe in peace and prosperity, to go with non-interventionism. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.